chairman of West Didsbury Astronomical Society. Sadly we don't meet in person these days, but I find these Zoom meetings have been working quite well for us, and it enables us to not to leave home and perhaps be able to invite speakers from further afield. As a little bit of Zoom etiquette, I would invite, once Martin starts talking, I invite everyone to mute their microphones. If you have a question you wanted to pose of Martin whilst he's talking, if you could type it into the chat facility, I will keep an eye on the chat facility during the course of Martin's talk. And if you could flag it up if it's a particularly burning question you wanted to ask Martin, and then I would take it upon myself to stop and ask him to address your comment, perhaps invite you to turn your microphone off and come in at that point. I think that works rather better than leaving it with everyone with their microphones on and a bit of a free for all, because it doesn't quite work with the time lag on Zoom. So as I mentioned earlier, I just want one announcement really, one announcement only. We're back here meeting on February the 8th, listening to Professor Ian Robson talking about the changing scene in astronomy, and that details of that are on our website. So I'm very pleased to welcome Martin back to talk to us. It's it's a year since he spoke before. He was introduced to us by Trevor, one of our committee members. I think they were chatting before everyone joined, through their interest in photography at rock concerts, and they were perhaps that's a subject of a completely different talk. But Martin spent his working life in cameras, camera repair, technical support, and perhaps that is the basis from where you learned some of the techniques you described to us last time in your Introduction to Astrophotography Part 1, which was delivered in January of last year. So I think that's enough from me. Martin, I'd ask you to give us your talk, and perhaps if everyone else can make sure their microphones are muted. Thank you very much.
Right, let me share my screen. This is the first Zoom meeting I've ever done, so I've been on the recipient of meetings but never actually run one, so we'll see how it goes. As I said last time, the talk, this is very unusual in that I'm giving this talk to an Astro club. This is normally a talk that I give to camera clubs to encourage camera club people to use the gear that they've already got to get into astrophotography. So it's a little bit unusual for me to be giving it to an astronomy club, because some of the things I make assumptions about, you might not have certain lenses, but get from it what you can. I have a very casual approach in a way to astrophotography. I don't have a permanent setup at home. My house is at the bottom of a hill. I have about 7 foot of patio, and then the hill starts. So on one side of me is the house wall, on the other side is a hill, and all around me are houses and bungalows, most of which have security lights, about 1,000 houses on the estate. I'm right on the edge of Stoke-on-Trent, according to the map, Bortle 6 area. But you'll see from some of the pictures I start with exactly what that means to me. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will then go according to plan. Right, let me try and get rid of what I don't need here. Right, okay. I'm just, I'm just going to say if you see me turn, but you won't. I'm just checking that this is looking all right, which it is. Okay. I'm going to, as I go through this personal journey of mine, I'm going to be talking about one or two of the mounts I've got, but I won't be going in great detail because I actually brought them with me last time. So when I talk about an astro track or a tracking mount, this is the normal setup that I use when I go out with my DSLR camera equipment. This is a picture of from my recent trip to France, where I've taken a lot of holidays, and I always take a tracking mount. This is called an Astro Track. It was I've had it about 20 years now. Any tracking mount will do when I talk about tracking mounts. The Skywatcher Star Adventurer is probably the one I'd choose if I don't have this one. And then I'll very often have an ordinary camera tripod, non-tracking, with another camera that I sort of mess about with while I'm leaving my first and most important camera doing the work. You'll see here is a polar scope for aligning it, and the bag with all my other spare camera equipment is hanging off the bottom of the tripod to make it stable. So when I go out and about, this is my normal setup. When I operate from home, this is more my normal setup. I have a Vixen mount, and here is my DSLR with a 500mm lens attached. I tend to use this at home because of the brightness of the sky means I can't really see that many interesting subjects. So I rely a lot on finding them, or at least getting them reasonably close with the computer handset here, and then tweaking once I know where I am. I get them lined up with the DSLR, and so at home that's the normal setup. So last time I spoke, I divided the talk into two halves. The first half was about solar system, sun, moon, and planets. I'm going to go back to that right at the end with a couple of updates, but I had to rush the deep sky section, and that covered wide field deep sky and single target deep sky, both of which are the same really. So we're going to sort of mix them up a bit, but I'll start off proper. This is one of the first pictures I ever took astrophotography wise. I took it in the early 70s, and it shows this was just a basic film camera on a tripod, long time exposure, and I was actually searching for Geminid meteors. This is the constellation Gemini, and Jupiter was in Gemini at that time. But this picture shows a lot of the issues that we have when we're working with astrophotography. The weather, the clouds, the issue with red light, the red street lights, which plagues a lot of our towns and cities, and the difficulty of tracking, keeping stars as pinpoints rather than moving. But this shot really got me going with astrophotography, because when I looked at this, I thought, well, you can see the colors of the stars, the brightness. You could see stars that I couldn't see visually, and you could see them there. And it sort of started me on my path to astrophotography. Not a lot happened for quite a number of years until I moved here to when I left my mum's house, got married, moved to Western Coyney, which is the southeast end of Stoke. And I thought, well, I'm going to see what the sky's like up here. And this is one of the first shots I took when I moved to this house. And as you can see, horrendous, absolutely horrendous light pollution. And I didn't have a tracking mount. So exactly the same problem with the sky moving across my exposure. Although even then you could see that it picked up the Orion Nebula and the color difference in the stars. But as I progressed more and more with my ordinary photography, I started to gather lenses and bits of equipment that made me to think a bit more about applying myself to get some better astrophotography shots without using a telescope, really just using the lenses that I had for the wildlife and aircraft photography that I had. And I went to a meeting of the local society where people talked about this AstroTrack piece of equipment, and I thought, well, what is it? And it was basically it was a tracking mount that allowed a camera to be put on the mount, and it would follow the rotation of the Earth and stop the movement. And this is one of the shots I'd taken with the mount to experiment in 2008, as you can see, to see how much light pollution I was actually getting at home. And you can see here that a 30-second exposure was orange top to bottom. This is a tree here at the bottom causing the cutoff here. But this sort of pollution was a real issue for me at first, until I really got to understand how to remove it. And in these days, when we had orange streetlights here, we don't have orange streetlights now, which I'll come on to in a minute. One of the easiest ways of removing light pollution was to use something called a red enhancing filter. And this was a relatively cheap filter available in the photography market, and it was designed to create more, strangely enough, it was designed to create more red in autumnal scenes. It's quite a strange filter, but whenever you actually put it on a camera and aimed it at the sky, you can see the without and with effect that this filter had. And so this red enhancing filter became something I used quite regularly at home to attempt to get astro shots without too much light pollution. Filters have become very complex over the years. I bought one called an IDAS, which was eye-wateringly expensive at the time. It was probably about 8-10 years ago, and it was over £100 then. And you'll see a result of that filter when used in an orange light situation in a little bit. But some of the modern filters that are available now, tri-band and quad-band filters for cutting out light pollution, I haven't tried yet, but I certainly intend to. But my lighting situation has changed quite dramatically in that the street lights have been replaced, the orange lights have been replaced with LED. And this is the effect now that I have at home. When I take any sort of a timed exposure at home, I get this milky covering from one side of the image to the other. And it really is, when I first got this, I put my head in my hands thinking, what on earth am I going to do about this? And it really potentially caused me a lot of headache. But I thought, I can't do anything about it. Let's see if I can work through it. And there are ways to try and reduce this, which I'll go into to a little bit. But I think I strongly suspect I shall, when I get one of these tri-band or quad-band filters, that'll be the permanent answer. One thing I must say to people who use camera equipment, ordinary camera equipment for astrophotography, is there's one very, very important thing that you must always do when you're using an ordinary camera lens, is to turn off the stabilization when you're trying to use it for astronomy. This is a shot of the Orion Nebula with a 150 to 500 Sigma, fairly standard wildlife lens that a lot of photographers would have. The side on the image on the left, this is with the vibration control turned on, and the shot on the right is exactly the same lens, exactly the same exposure, but the stabilization turned off. And this confuses some people, why you would need to turn off image stabilization when they think, well, perhaps it should help on keeping the stars nice and sharp. But stabilization in a camera lens is designed to stop the swaying and bouncing movement as you're holding it. And when you actually put one of these lenses onto a tripod, the moving optics inside the lens are actually looking for a swaying or a bouncing movement as you're holding the lens. And in doing that, they actually move the optics around inside, which creates all these lovely little swirly patterns. And completely destroy any decent work as an astro lens. So if you are going to use an ordinary camera lens for astrophotography, the very, very first thing you need to do is have a look at the lens, see if it's got stabilization, and turn it off. Always remember, after you've done your astronomy and you go back into you doing wildlife or whatever, turn it back on again. A number of times I've forgotten that, is beyond belief. But certainly have it turned off when you're doing astronomy. And you can see here straight away the difference that makes, and it's absolutely critical to getting a decent bit of use out of an ordinary wildlife lens. So on to how to get images. This is the first image I took when I first bought a full frame camera. Digital cameras that are around nowadays have a varied amount of pixels and a lot of different sizes for the chip that's in them. And the biggest commonly available ones are called full frame, 35 millimeters by 24 millimeters across, which is the same size as the old film cameras. And these produce, or can produce, some really very good astro photographs. But the first one I bought was probably about, must be at least 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago. Could even be longer than that, looking back. And the day I got it, the sky was clear at the back of the house. And I thought, well, I'm going to do a little experiment here. And I put the camera out on an ordinary tripod with no stacking mount, and aimed the camera with an 85mm lens at this star here, which is Beta Andromeda. And for those who are familiar with the sky, the square of Pegasus is here, and you go 2 stars to the left of the top left corner, 2 stars up, and then to the right of that is the Andromeda galaxy, which is there. But the interesting thing is, equidistant from there, but the opposite direction, is another galaxy in Triangulum down here. And I thought, well, I wonder, with all the light pollution that I've got, if I aim this 85mm lens on this nice new full frame camera at that point on an ordinary camera tripod, will I pick up this galaxy? I was fairly sure I'd get that one, because it is a fairly bright object in the sky. And so I did a series. I did 5 2-second exposures and then stacked them to produce this image. I only did 2 seconds because I wanted to keep the stars as pinpoint as possible. As you can see, there's a lot of noise in this image, but the stars have not really trailed over 2 seconds. But it has picked up this galaxy here in Triangulum, as well as the one in Andromeda. So my initial experiment was I was very pleased with that it picked up both. And then I thought, well, this is potentially quite interesting, because if I took, say, 100 or 1,000 images off a tripod like this and stacked them, would it produce a decent astrophotograph? And to this day, I've never tried that, because I've always decided to use the time to work with a tracker now that I have one. But a lot of people now with digital SLRs who don't have tracking mounts are starting to experiment in exactly that way, taking short exposures with the ISO setting in the camera fairly high, producing quite noisy results, but stacking quite large quantities of images and getting interesting results. Not as good as they would on a stacker, but quite interesting. Now, I've got 1 or 2 examples further on to show other areas of the sky that I started doing this experiment with, but never finished. But the short exposure as well, taken here of only 5 seconds, meant that I didn't really pick up much light pollution. So even though I've got a lot of light pollution here, it doesn't really show. And there is a gradient in the sky. There's less light pollution up high than there was down low, and you can see that in this shot. So another way of if you do have a lot of light pollution at home and want to get away from it without putting filters or doing a lot of jiggery pokery in Photoshop, is to choose subjects that are very high up in the sky, and you get less light pollution in that way. But the best way, if you were trying to repeat this shot, would be to move to a dark sky location, which is what I did for this image. Exactly the same lens, 85mm, not quite the same alignment, sadly, which is a shame. But this was taken in a place in France where I regularly go on holiday, and a lot of the images on this talk are taken. But you'll see here, this is a 9-minute stack of 30-second exposures. And you can see how much detail it's picked up. This is on a tracker. You can see also that I haven't attempted to correct for the brightness differences that are here. There are ways of correcting the brightness difference between the top, middle, and bottom, but I don't really intend to go into that because it's perhaps for another talk where somebody can explain about taking flats and putting them in your images to even out the lighting. But you can see how having a stacked image of lots of 30-second exposures here has brought out some absolutely tiny stars, quite a bit of detail in both galaxies, and even another little cluster down here. My move into stacking images took a long time. Because of my the way I take pictures normally of aircraft and wildlife, you don't stack any of those. You take a picture and it's either good or bad. And I was determined to carry that way of thinking onto my astronomy shots when I first started to get going. And this is something I want to impress upon you through this talk, that is a bad mistake. And it's one that took me years to get over. And if anything comes out of this talk, I would say try stacking as early as you possibly can in your astronomical photography experience, because it will save you a lot of wasted time and it will make a huge difference in your shots. Having said that, when I took this shot, which was probably nearly 20 years ago, I was really satisfied with it. It was a 55-second exposure, looking up at Cygnus from France, nice dark sky location, and I was really quite happy with this shot. But looking back, even though I was happy with this single exposure, I now know that if I'd have stacked probably 20 or 30 minutes of these exposures, the image would have been so much better, as you'll see as I move on. Again, this is one of an image that I've had for quite a long time, and it's a bit of an odd one because this is a stacked exposure. It was taken with a 24 to 120 zoom lens, which is a very common lens that people have as photographers, and it was taken out near Leek in North Staffordshire, out on the Staffordshire moorlands in the autumn time with the Milky Way nice and high. And this is 20 minutes worth of 30-second exposures stacked to show the density of the Milky Way as it stretched across the sky. And here's something for you to put an answer in the chat window, and perhaps Phil can relay one or two of these. I'm sure I did give the answer to this last time I spoke, so it'll be interesting to see if anybody can remember. This is 20 minutes worth of stacked exposures, but it actually took me probably about an hour and a half to get those 20 minutes worth of stacked exposures. And this was taken out on the North Staffordshire moors, just below Buxton, between Leek and Buxton. See if anybody can think why it took me so long to get 20 minutes worth of 30-second exposures from that location. And it probably wouldn't take me that long just at the moment, but most times of the year, it would take quite a long time to get that amount of exposure detail when you're taking this sort of image. The strange thing about this image, while anybody makes a guess at an answer to that, the strange thing about this image is that it's almost completely black and white, and I've never got to the bottom of why that happened, because it was supposed to be in color, but when the image was stacked, it strangely lost all its color. But I really quite like it because it's really kept a lot of its detail in the dark lanes of the Milky Way here. And that was literally just using a standard 24 to 70 lens on the tracking mount on the Astro track and pointing almost straight up. I do, on almost all of my images, I crop the edges off, and there's a very important reason for that, which I'll show you on one of the later images. But I wonder if anybody's got an answer to why this took so long. I'm looking to see if has anybody.
There's quite a selection of answers, Martin. There's aeroplanes, satellites, cold fingers, delay in getting signals from your camera to the phone, plane stacking for Manchester, noise reduction, car headlights.
It is the aircraft. That's good. It's either somebody's remembered it from my last talk or somebody's worked it out. But yeah, the aircraft. This is one of the real things that will be quite frustrating when you get to a dark location. The aircraft caused such a lot of hassle, and the aircraft coming right over the top of me as I was trying to take these images wrecked such a large number of these images. It was quite frightening. Now you can edit the air traffic out, but I prefer to work with as clean an image as possible to start with. I'm not one of these people that likes spending hours and hours on Photoshop. And yes, aircraft here and the dark site in France that I go to, where it isn't as bad, but it is on the route out of Toulouse. Just between Leek and Bucks and the amount of aircraft that were coming straight across here was absolutely staggering. And so it took me absolutely ages to get what should have taken me quite a short amount of time to get. But you can see basic standard lenses that most people who do any sort of photography would have can potentially, with a stacker and just using 30-second exposures, get some quite interesting detail out of the Milky Way. Now, this is the difference that a shot when you go to an even darker site.
Martin,
yeah,
there are one or two questions I think people have asked. Andy Hewitt asked, do you have your DSLR Astro modified?
No, it's as it comes.
Annette asked, where in France? Was Bortle in France?
This France, I've never checked the Bortles rating, but it's quite low. This is about a mile drive north of Toulouse. It's a place near Cahors in the Lot Valley in France. And as you can see from this picture, there is light pollution on the very, very edges. And this is horizon to horizon of the Milky Way. And this is my favorite picture. It's a Nikon D750 full frame image taken with a 15mm f2.8 Sigma lens. And people have often say to me, oh, that's a bit of an expensive set of kit. Well, the Nikon D750 I use for a lot of my other photography. I have it for years. The thing that really makes this image is the Sigma wide angle. And people again say, yeah, but you're going to be paying hundreds and hundreds of pounds for this equipment. And they're always amazed when I say that this lens cost me £50. And when I say that to people, because astrophotography, as long as you've got an SLR, even a basic one, this is a good SLR, but even a basic one will produce really good results if you get the right lens on it. And this particular lens I got off eBay for £50 because it was broken. And the reason it was broken is the focusing, the autofocus didn't work. And it really didn't work. It was well broken. It actually focuses on manual to infinity when you set it to about 10 foot on the scale. And that frightened everybody off. The optics were good, but of course, for astrophotography, you don't need autofocus. You only need manual focus. So keep your eyes out for high value, good quality lenses where the manual focus is broken or the lens exterior is battered and bashed. As long as the optics are good, potentially you can end up with something really decent for astrophotography. Now, I said on an earlier bit about the fact that I often crop my photographs. This is exactly as the complete full frame, and I put this for a purpose to show you why I would sometimes crop. If I zoom into this and move to the edges, you'll see the stars at the edges are all not stars. They're all triangular shaped. And that's something that happens with a lot of lenses near the edge. You get this almost like a bat flying shape at the edges. And this is called coma. And it affects telescopes as well. But it affects wide angle lenses particularly badly. And this puts off a lot of people from buying the lenses. But you just look at that sort of image. You could crop it the center section and have really quite a nice image of stars, of the galaxy. I mean, you can even see, if I zoom in, there's the shot I was looking at earlier with the 85mm with Andromeda, Beta Andromeda, and M33 there. But look at that for a shot of the Milky Way off a 50-pound lens, because the autofocus was broken. That is the only thing that's wrong with it. So keep your eye open for what could be interesting bargains, where people are getting rid of lenses because of damage to the external bits of the lens, which are neither here nor there. As long as you can focus on infinity, you can use it for astronomy. I bought all sorts of odd lenses in the past, manual focus things to play about with, and the way I look at photography is, I think, experiment. It's not going to cost you anything. So if you can get a lens cheap and it doesn't turn out any good, well, it's not a big deal. But if you can get a lens cheap and it turns out something interesting like this, it's a fantastic bargain. So I very often will buy all sorts of odd things and just experiment with them. And certain ones I'll keep, and certain ones I'll give away, certain ones I end up throwing in the bin so that nobody wastes the time on. But it's certainly worth experimenting with whatever camera you've got, and it doesn't matter whether it's like this one, a full frame, whether it's a crop sensor, whether it's a mirrorless or whatever. Point it up and experiment and look at the results. And from the results, make decisions as to what you need to do, whether you need to get a tracker or a better quality lens or a different wide angle or whatever. But because of comb around the edge of a lot of photographic lenses, I always say to people, just shoot slightly wider than you're actually wanting to do, so you can crop the center section of the image out, like here, which is the center section of that previous image. Although this is taken with 2 nights worth of data, so this is I can't remember how many minutes. So it's over 20 minutes worth of data just on the center section, and that's probably how I would normally use it. Although the impact of this, the wider thing from literally horizon to horizon, does have quite a good impact if you're looking for that sort of a shot. I don't tend to do the astronomy where people have big mountains in the way. I like to see the stars. I'm not a landscape photographer, never have done a lot of landscape photography, but I enjoy looking at starscapes. Now this one, when I took this, I thought this was wonderful. Now when I look back on it, I think it's horrendous. But when I first started stacking and experimenting with stacking, I really struggled getting colors right. What color should a starscape be like? What color should be there? It's quite difficult, because it's when you look with your eye through the telescope, you don't see color in anything other than the very brightest things. So when you look at this through your telescope, you can't see that it's blue, but you take a picture and you definitely see there's blue there. And when you edit it, how much blue are you supposed to put in? And this, as I say, was one of my first goes. It's 5 minutes worth of stacked 30-second exposures with a 200mm lens. It's not a big lens. And I say at the time I thought it was great, but when you zoom in, it's really quite poor. But it was a start. It was something that kicked me on to starting to experiment more with stacking. So let's have a look at the Pleiades and different types of different lengths of time in stacking. That previous one was 5 minutes in Leek in North Staffordshire. This is 3 minutes 45 seconds worth from France with a 300mm lens and a 1.7 converter. Looking back now, you can see here that there's really quite a lot of pleasant blue nebulosity, but look at the noise in the shot here. It really is quite awful. And if I'd have, instead of taken 3 minutes here, if I'd have taken 30 or 40 minutes worth of 30-second exposures or whatever I was using at the time to create it, it doesn't really matter whether it was 1 minute, 30 seconds or whatever, this wouldn't have all the noise here, and I would have had a much better shot. But at the time, I was still learning how to stack, and I didn't understand that you really need to pay attention to the amount of data that you put in. I was very much I'd go out one night and I'd take a few minutes worth on the Pleiades, a few minutes worth here, a few minutes on there, a few minutes on Andromeda, a few minutes on the double cluster, and I'd come back in at the end of a night with, I don't know, 10 different targets taken. I don't do that now, but I did it then, and you can see the difference. Look at this next shot. Now this is 41 minutes worth of data, but this is from home with a light pollution filter to cut through the orange light. But you can see the smoothness of the outside is improved absolutely dramatically, yet I've still got some nice pleasant swirling, not quite as intense as I would in a dark sky location in France. But the important thing to notice is the edge, that the improvement of the general feel of the shot is massive, especially, you know, when you compare looking back to this noise and looking back even further to this, which really was a yuck. So if there's one thing I can impress upon you, whatever you do, whenever you start learning, take lots of images. You can't really undertake the number of images that you need to stack. It really is the most important thing I can stress on doing either wide field or single target deep sky photography is take lots of images. You certainly won't regret it. Whereas if now it looks like I'm not going to get to that dark sky location in France again, so I won't have the opportunity to go there and repeat that shot with 40 minutes, 1 hour, an hour, 2, 3, 4 hours worth of data. I'll have to try that from somewhere else. And then this one. Now, why will I have put this one here? And the answer is simple. This isn't a single, well, it's a stack, but it's a stack taken without a tracker. It's an ordinary tripod with my 300mm f4 lens and a 1.4 converter, and it's 5 8-second images stacked. 8 seconds, because that was the sort of time I thought we're still getting reasonably round stars. I mean, this is something I'll mention while I'm talking about this. A lot of people have these rules, 500 rules, 600 rules, whatever rules, about how long you can take an exposure before stars start to trail. I always say to people, forget those rules completely. Take an image, guess at the number of seconds to do, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, doesn't matter, absolutely irrelevant. Take an image and then zoom in on live view straight away. Zoom in on preview when you've taken the image, zoom in and have a look at the star. If there's no trailing, try one a bit longer. If there is trailing, drop the time back a bit. And you'll find within a minute or two what is the ideal time for that lens on that camera. And this is what I did on this one. I took a 30-second exposure, trailing was awful. And I dropped down to 20, trailing was awful. Dropped down to 10, trailing was just there. So I dropped down to 8 seconds and trailing was pretty much gone. And then I took 5 8-second shots stacked, and I thought, you know, looking back at those previous shots with this level of noise, if I'd have only taken, say, 100, I bet I could have got a really decent image out of this. Obviously, the constellation would have moved. I would have had to kept adjusting on the tripod, moving it back to the image every 3 or 4 shots. But that isn't a problem. Stacking programs can cope with that. Deep Sky Stacker will easily cope with that sort of movement. But this is something I'm still very tempted to have a go at and do, say, 100 shots just on a tripod with equipment like this and see what comes out, because I reckon there's a distinct possibility that without any tracking at all, you could get an acceptable, it'll never be as good as something like that, but quite an acceptable result with showing the nebulosity on certain subjects. To hit home about stacking again, here's another series of examples, this time on the Andromeda Galaxy. As you can see, this is horrendously noisy. It really is. Looking back and thinking about it, this is not a great image. But when I took it, which was about 20 years ago, it was a single exposure on a really old camera, a Nikon D40X. It was an 80-second tracked image on my Astro track. And when I took it, I was so pleased with this, because you could see dust lanes on Andromeda, you could see the other galaxies orbiting. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. This is the way to do astronomy. Single shot, get the result, and loving it. And again, this was from a dark site location at the dark site in France. I went back a few years later with a Nikon D90 and did 34 seconds and got this. And I thought, oh, the cameras are improving so much. And look at and yet now you look at it and think, we're so noisy. But I was very, very satisfied with this image. And I always say to people, use what you've got at the time. Don't always think I've got to get better, get better. Try with what you've got. And at the time I had a Nikon D90, and I was getting this sort of noisy image. If I'd have just realized that stacking would have made this 100% better, then it would have been brilliant. But I didn't grasp the fact that I needed to stack. A few years later, I got the message, and you can see the difference that it makes to the background to foreground noise and the contrast. This is 10 minutes worth of stacked data. 300 mil again, with a 1.4 converter cropped around the edge. And this was when I was on holiday down in Devon. I always carry my Astro track with me when I go on holiday, just in case it's a dark site. And this particular holiday, it wasn't a bad site, so I got the 300 mil out and stacked 10 minutes worth of data. And I came away with this and showed it to some of the friends in the astronomy club, and they thought, you know, this is not bad at all, considering it's just your 300 mil aircraft lens that you go when you do aircraft or wildlife. And then one of them said, you know, there's a way you can improve that picture in probably less than a second. And I looked at the picture and thought, no, I think if you're going to improve that, you're going to have to put a load more data, perhaps, or do something significant in Photoshop. And he said, no, less than a second, and that picture will be improved. And you know what he did? He did this. He just rotated it 180 degrees. And suddenly I thought, that does look better, because the dark lanes in the galaxy, they look as if they're silhouetted, just as if something was in front of the sun. Look at the difference. I'll just rotate it back. Look at the picture and then look at it again. And I think visually, the difference in rotating that galaxy round to this direction, I think that makes a huge improvement. And any shot that I now do with Andromeda, I always do it that way round. I'm not sure what everybody else thinks, but that's very, very simple thing. And because your perception as a person knows that if something's in front of something bright, it should be silhouetted, it suddenly gives depth to the feeling of the picture. And I every single time I've shot Andromeda since then, this is the way I present it. And even now, when I do any astronomical subject, I always twist it in different directions, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, just to see whether that makes an improvement to the visual feel of the image. Because depending on whether you've got if you're looking at that in an eyepiece of a telescope, you may see it that way anyway if you've got a mirror in the way. So and who's to say that isn't the correct way to display it? So just bear in mind, simple things like this, a little bit of experimentation. It's always been the way I've done my photography, whether it's astronomical or elsewhere. Experiment, try things, If they don't work, it's digital. It's a big deal. You just put it, click undo, or whatever, or if it's scrap, delete it, chuck it away. It's you're not really losing any sleep over it, but experiment, and you sometimes might find something that you really like. I'm going to put this back to the not so good way and leave it like that for if I have to give this talk again. I've done all the clubs around here. I don't know how many times with this talk, and they still keep coming. Come back and tell us again. This is an interesting one because I tried, this is, let me just read what it is. Yes, this is 20 minutes worth of 30-second exposures of Andromeda from home under this new LED lighting. And as you can see, I've done it in black and white, and there's a reason for this. I really struggle getting interesting colors out when there's a lot of pollution with LED light. And let me show you the problem I have. And I've not really got an answer to it. This is the stack. Let me show you what one of the originals looks like. Now, that's the problem that I have. 30 seconds gives me that at the moment. So when you actually look at that and think, that's 20 minutes worth of 30 seconds, it perhaps doesn't look that bad when you compare it to what each one actually is. But the original shot, the colors are absolutely awful on this. And so I never tend to show the color image because it's so awful. It's just, it's hard to get on the eyes. But converting it, again, an experiment, converting it into black and white makes it a usable image. But wow. But what do you do if you do a lot of time with a 300mm lens in a dark location? Well, you get that. This is 32 minutes worth of stacked data, 300mm lens with a 1.4 converter. And the galaxy is nigh on reaching the edge. It is slightly cropped, as I always tend to do, but that I think so far is my best astronomical image of Andromeda using the Astro Tracker, a 300mm lens and a 1.4 converter. And that's I think I'm going to struggle to get much better than that without having an Astro conversion, without getting the IR filter removed from any of my cameras. All my cameras are unmodified. Well, that's not true. I do have a very old one that's modified, but it was never any good. But all the ones that I use are not Astro modified at this point in time. So there's nothing on these images that you'll see tonight that comes from an Astro modified camera. They're all standard. So what else have I played about with? Well, this at one point was my favorite lens. This was my Sigma 150 to 500 wildlife lens. And this was in France. And, you know, all right, I've blown the core in the Orion Nebula, but I'm not over worried about that. I wouldn't do it now. This is quite a few years old. This is probably about 12, 13 years old, this image. But a lens that's really quite slow. This is an f5.6, f6.3 lens. So it's quite slow, 150 to, was it 150 to 500 actually, this one was. But if you, as long as you stack enough images, you get a reasonable amount of decent quality. This is 4 minutes of stacked data. This is a Tamron 150 to 600 zoom lens, where I tried to get a bit more detail out of the center. I didn't quite get as much out of the edge. I should have took more data, and but again, really for a wildlife lens that's not designed for astronomy, pointing them up at the sky and just experimenting, trying and just seeing what you can pull out is often quite a good idea. And this is another one of the experiments I did with no tracker at all. This is 17 seconds worth of data, 29 frames here, and they produce 17 seconds worth of data at 12,800 ISO. But again, all right, it's noisy as anything and all blotchy, but what if I had taken 100 images? A lot of this blockiness would have gone, and and with no tracking, this I think would have worked. So if you're just starting out on your astrophotography, you've got no tracking mount at all, just experiment. Stick your ISO level up high. Doesn't matter how noisy individual shots are, if you can stack enough of them, and that's the big deal. You've got to stack enough of them, that noise will start to disappear. And this is what I would class as a lucky shot. My wife is poorly at the moment. She's broke her ankle, so we're sitting in most nights watching Stargate, from the 10 series of Stargate from start to finish, and so we tend to watch 2 a night. And a few nights ago, the sky was clear outside, so I said to her, just before we watch the first episode, I'm just going to stick my camera out the back and just leave it running and see how the light pollution is. So I put my mount out at the back, stuck the 500mm on, and I thought, you know, for a change, I'm going to change one of the settings. And I changed the settings so that it had noise removal, high ISO noise removal in. So it takes a 30-second shot and then does another 30-second shot and removes the noise. And I aimed it at the Pleiades and set it going, didn't even polar align, aimed it roughly right, literally didn't look through the polar alignment telescope, walked in and watched the first of the 2 episodes of Stargate. In the break in between the 2, I walked out to have a look what was going on, looked, and there was trailing. I thought, oh, interesting though. I thought, not much light pollution. I thought, that's strange, shame about the trailing. Changed the subject to the Orion Nebula, gave one of the legs of the tripod a swift kick, literally a swift kick, never checked the polar alignment, set it off again, and this is the result. This is one DVD of Star Trek, one episode of, not Star Trek, Stargate, one episode of Stargate's worth of tracked exposure at 500mm cropped. And all right, the stars are not perfectly sharp, but for a lucky no effort shot with no alignment at all, just literally a lucky swift kick, and that's it's good enough for Facebook. It's not really good enough for Flickr, but it's good enough for Facebook. So experiment. Don't always think that because you haven't done everything quite right that you're not going to get something that's usable, because occasionally, doesn't always work, but occasionally it does. Just to give you an idea of some other images I get with the tracking mount and ordinary camera lenses. And by ordinary, I find I use my 300mm, sometimes with, sometimes without converters, more than any other lens. And I'm just starting to use a 500mm a lot as well. But this is M33 and Triangulum. The other galaxy on the very first image I showed with the Andromeda galaxy at the top. This is a shot from a dark sky holiday I had down in Devon, and this is 12 and a half minutes worth of exposures, which I'm quite pleased with, because the tracker was literally leaning against the front door of the holiday let when I was taking this, so I was quite pleased with this. How long have I been going? I'll run a little bit longer, perhaps another 5 minutes or so. Got to run through comets because they are really worth looking at. Comets are great for ordinary camera lenses because they very often fill a reasonable amount of sky. And so if you look at them through a telescope, you don't really get all the beauty of them. This was a 44-second single exposure on a tracking mount of Pan-STARRS from a few years ago. I couldn't see this comet with my naked eye. It was in the light pollution. I found it in binoculars, aimed the 80 to 200 lens in roughly the right direction, took a series of images till I found it, and then got it with 44 seconds here. The original image was just completely orange, but turned to black and white. It's usable. This was Lovejoy, tracking mount, 600mm photographic lens on the tracking mount. It only just coped with it. This was taken from down in the New Forest when I was visiting my daughter in Southampton. This is 6 minutes 40 seconds worth of stacked data from a 600mm. But the interesting thing here, comets so very often overexposed when they're bright, and you don't see the tail detail. So I always say to people, invert it. And if you're taking a shot of a comet, always look at the inverted, because you see all this lovely detail in the tail that you don't tend to do because you're distracted by the brightness of the head of the comet. So invert it, and you sometimes get some really quite interesting views. Not all comets are great, of course, but try and this one, what was it called? It was Comet 64P. The only way you can get a really interesting shot of that comet is to try and get it when it goes past something else, like here when it went past the Andromeda galaxy. This is an image with an 80 to 200 zoom lens, which is again a fairly common lens, just on a tracking mount. But the one everybody will remember from last year was Neowise. This was a shot from Stoke-on-Trent while the noctilucent clouds were going early mornings in the 11th of July. Beautiful to see the clouds, noctilucent clouds, and the comet behind it. This is again with my 300mm lens on the tracking mount. After this, I went out with my friend, up to the this is what you lot up there up north produce for me when I go out into the Peak District. This is we went out onto the North Staffordshire moors and had the beauty of the glow of Buxton and Manchester to the north of us. It was just after midnight, and you can see the comet there and just odd bits of noctilucent cloud, but it shows how I run my setup. Here is my camera, the 70 to 200 on the tracking mount, and my ordinary camera on the tripod. I didn't use any of these images, but you'll see an image that I took for this one, and my friend had his two cameras there just in front. And what this camera, the 70 to 200 lens produced was this, which was really quite nice. And I managed to get a meteor going through at the same time, which I was quite pleased with. And the stacked version, when I stacked, that was that previous image was just a single 30-second shot. This is about 4 minutes worth of stack, and it shows some quite interesting detail in the comet and the inverted view, perhaps a little bit more. But the interesting thing about this comet is I'd got a holiday booked in France the week after, so I was able to go to France to the dark sky site and catch it at its peak, which I was extremely pleased with. And this is taken with the same lens that I used right at the beginning to show Andromeda and the Triangulum galaxy, the 85mm lens. This is about 3 minutes worth of data stacked, approximately 30-second stacks, about 3 minutes worth from the dark sky location. And again, the inverse view of this, you see all the detail in the tail, but fascinating. That's up at the top here. Your mouse is not liking going up there because of the menu at the top. Just above the mouse there, you can see M81 and M82 in Ursa Major. This comet stretched through such a huge amount of sky in France. It was quite staggering. And if you force it even more, you can actually see the more of the detail, and you can see odd satellites that were coming through in the images as well. But a week later, it was almost invisible to the naked eye, just a tiny dot and a tiny tail. Quite staggering how it disappeared over a week. Again, 300mm on the Markarian's chain. Or was this 500mm? This might have been a 500mm lens. But to 30 minutes of stacked data. 30 minutes is enough to get a reasonable result if you stack 30 minutes worth of 30 seconds in a light polluted area. This is from home. So you really see huge numbers of galaxies in this image. It's the stacking that does, and this is why I'm stressing stack. M81 and M82. This is a 300mm lens with a 1.7 converter cropped. I was hoping to get more red, but I'm not sure why I didn't. But again, not through a telescope. It's just a 300mm lens with a 1.7 converter, but 5 minutes, nearly 6 minutes worth of stacked images. And This I'm really pleased with. This was a 300mm lens shot looking for the Veil Nebula. It took me about 20 minutes to find it. It was so faint. But when I found it, I then put more images together and got some colour. This is I intend to go back to this subject and have another go of the Veil Nebula and see if I can get even more, because I really didn't expect to pick it up with a 300mm lens. Now that was the last shot of my standard talk. I'm just going to do a couple of minutes before I stop, just to update the first talk. First thing, that was, if you can remember from the last talk, that was the aurora shot that I took a few years ago from North Staffordshire. It's just a reminder to say the sun is starting to come back into life. So keep your eye on the aurora sites, the warning sites, because if you see the KP index getting up towards 6, go out of the city onto a dark sky location and just take photographs, because you might catch it. We caught this one by accident. We were going to go home and then we took a shot and saw that the aurora was there. Couldn't see all this colour visually. I thought it was light pollution here from Manchester and Buxton. And of course, you saw the shots last time that I was taking of the ISS. It was coming over. I've got one or two better ones since then. This is handheld 500mm with a 2x converter and a 1.4 converter, and this is one of the most detailed shots I've got so far, but I'm always trying to get more detailed images. And the important thing about this is the ISS is going to be coming over again at the end of this month, so that's the time to try and get this shot, get the biggest lens you can physically hold. And the last week of this month, take as many shots as it comes over as possible. Use about 1,000th of a second as a shutter speed. Doesn't matter where in the frame the images are. Run the images through the program called PIPP and tick the box that says ISS, and any images will come out nicely centered like this. And the important thing is when you can either save them as images or do this. Let me show you. What am I going to show you? This. And this is what you get if you put all the images together into a video. The ISS comes over, and here you can actually see the resilience capsule docked to the ISS at the front here. And then as the ISS goes past, it goes down low and I lose it. Let's watch that again. And this is all handheld. And it's the program PIPP that stabilizes it into a nice little video like this. This is a 500mm lens with a 2x converter and a 1.4 converter, handheld, tracking the ISS as it comes over. These are great. I think these are great to achieve, and they're dead easy. You just have to give it a try, and you don't necessarily get it right first time, because it takes a little bit of practice to get it working, but you can see from stills that it's definitely the resilience capsule that I've got. This is a shot from March last year with no little bit sticking out of the front. The resilience capsule docked, and there's the capsule at the front. These I'm taking still a lot. ISS going across the moon, and there is, for all of you people up north there is an ideal time to get. Oh, wrong button. Let me try that again. If you go to Transit Finder and put your location in, transitfinder.com, put your location in and do a calculate, you will see at the moment, when this is done, that on Thursday the 21st, there is an opportunity for you up there to have a go at getting the ISS crossing the face of the moon. All you need to do is get your camera lens or telescope and have it in video mode. This is the path that you'll be able to see it. That line in the middle is where, if you're on that line, the ISS will cross the center of the moon and then either side here. So if you're on that line there, the ISS will go across like that. If you're on this line here, it'll go across like that. If you're on the line there, it'll go across like that. So depending on where you are, there's a lovely opportunity for you to see the ISS going across the moon next month. Not next month, in a couple of weeks. And also, I don't know if you do this, if you've got one of these. This is something I've been playing about with. I wanted to show you last time, but forgot. You should have been, it's worth thinking about as a club, having a meteor camera. These are great fun. If you haven't got one, this camera at my house recorded this meteor at 3:37 in the morning. You're never going to be out then, but you leave it. It's like a video camera you leave running all night, and in the morning the program will scan the videos and leave you lots of little images of what's gone over in the night, and sometimes you get a nice exploding meteor, which is great fun. So I think, is that me lot? That could be me lot. Let's have a look. Oh yes, I've done instead of the ISS going across when it's in darkness, that's a couple in light, which you didn't see last time. I've done Mars. Anybody's done what? Oh, finally, last shot. I've bought myself a new telescope. I've actually spent a bit of money, bought myself a Skywatcher Mac 180 Pro Mac, and it's producing some lovely images of the moon, nice and detailed. This is the one and only one I've got so far, but I'm hoping over the next few months to put some even more detailed moon images up, so watch me flicker. And that's the list of stuff that I use. So thanks for listening. I'm going hoarse now, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get back to normal. And there we go.
Martin, that was as last year, that was absolutely tremendous. So quite a canter through a lot of amazing photographs taken during the course of your, I guess, your life in astrophotography, and very humble to present your images from the early days and to discuss them and be prepared to criticize them. There are one or two residual questions left on the chat. I think, Andy, do you want to open up your microphone? Andy Hewitt, open up your microphone and ask Martin your two questions.
I think was the first one about the focus, or was that the second question, Phil? I can't remember now.
You asked one about prime focus and one about the process of imaging.
Oh yes, thanks, Phil. Yeah,
processing of imaging.
The first one, Martin, was I'm dabbling with prime focus astrophotography, and I'm starting off my sessions by focusing on a star like Vega to get good.
What I do,
and then switch to my deep sky object. And I just wondered, is there any difference? Excuse me, when you're doing just the photography that you've been talking about tonight?
No, that's exactly what I do. Right. I choose the brightest star in the sky normally. Certainly when you're using a wide angle lens, you need a bright star, because otherwise you just can't find it. I zoom in full in live view to the absolute maximum in live view, and then peak the focus for the smallest dot, and then let go. and that's it. Then don't touch it for the whole of the session. I have had occasionally, it doesn't happen very often, if there's been a massive temperature difference when I've been out on a hillside or something doing some photography, I sometimes wonder whether there's been a change in the focus because of the temperature difference. So I'll sometimes stop and check again, but I do exactly the same procedure. Find a nice bright star, fully zoom in on live view to the maximum amount, pick it for the smallest pinpoint, let go, and away I go. Yes, recenter it to whatever I'm aiming at, and then away I go.
Great, thanks for that. And then the other question that I typed to Phil on the chat was about the processing of the images, because you mentioned about the stacking and how I think you don't use calibration frames when you're just using this method. But what do you do for? Is there lots of stretching? Being the phrase that's used for the processing of the images in something like Photoshop or GIMP or whatever.
Right. I hate Photoshop. I use it as infrequently as possible. I really find my photography generally has been one of try and get it as good as possible without messing about too much. The difficulty with astrophotography is that because you've got such faint stuff, you do have to do an amount of processing. So what I would do, for example, if I was stacking using deep sky stacker, once I've got the finished stack there, I would add 20% to the oh, what do I add 20% to? Let me just bring it up. Just bear with me. Let me grab the other mouse and bring Deep Sky Stacker up on the other computer. Deep Sky Stacker. I bring 20% up on. Oh, it won't work without me getting one. I adjust on the curves. I adjust the RGB so that they're on the steep section of the curve, and then I put 20% on the whatever I can't remember what tab it is on the right hand side of that screen where you have the curve. There's 3 tabs, and on the right hand side, the right hand side tab, I add 20%. And that makes quite a big difference before I then save that image as a TIFF. I just can't remember what the tab's called off the top of my head, but it's the right hand tab of that of once your image is on screen of where the RGB.
Which software are you talking about? Sorry.
This is Deep Sky Stacker.
Unfortunately, I'm not a Windows user, so I don't use Deep Sky Stacker. But I appreciate the explanation anyway.
Yes. Well, it's.
Is it luminosity, Martin?
Yes.
Luminosity.
So somebody else could answer that, would it?
I think it's luminosity, isn't it?
Luminosity, I think it is. Yes, yeah, I think it is. It's luminosity. I then drop it into Lightroom and just tweak the sliders in Lightroom, and that's all. I don't really do a huge amount more than that. I certainly, I've all my life I've avoided Photoshop because I feel it too complex. I've got it, but I just occasionally use it, mainly to produce the images that I have of the ISS coming across the moon, because you can load them into a stack into the layers quite easily and just bring them all together in one nice picture, all the frames into one nice picture, and it's dead easy in Photoshop. But that's normally the only time I use Photoshop. So Lightroom, I just tweak the sliders a little bit to get it to a nice feel and then save it, and that's normally all the processing I do. I don't have most of the Astro programs that people who do it. As I say, I'm sort of a casual astronomer. I don't spend hours editing me photographs if I can at all help it. So I try to do as little as possible.
Okay, thank you.
I have downloaded. I've just seen about Cyril. I have now downloaded that, but I haven't tried that yet.
Would anyone else like to ask any questions of Martin at this stage, or should we move on to Andrew and showing some of our members' photographs? Any other questions for Martin now? Well, Andrew, do you want to? I think you should be able to share the screen as well. And
yes. Much, Phil, and thank you very much to Martin as well for a really inspiring and enthusiastic talk. It was absolutely great, fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to try and share my screen, and I've got, as I said earlier, contributions from 6 of our members. I'm going to show a few pictures that I took, and then I've got some from Pierre, some from Jason, and then Zainath, Annette, and Trevor finally. And I do apologise for Trevor because I didn't have time to put all of his images in, but I've put quite a few of them in. So let me try and share the screen. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, again. Okay, so I went up to, this is the first shots from me, and I went up to the top of Kerridge Hill, where White Nancy is, and to photograph Comet Neo, WISE, and was lucky enough to see these fantastic noctilucent clouds. So this was with my Fujifilm X-T3, which is a pretty standard crop sensor mirrorless camera. I was using a 16 to 80 optically stabilized lens, and this was actually tripod supported. So that particular lens, it knows when it's on a tripod. We were talking about it earlier, that you should always make sure the stabilization is turned off, but some of the older lenses, you do have to turn it off. Quite a long, quite a fast film speed there. But I quite like taking pictures of astronomical objects in context. So I like to have something in the actual scene as well. But that's a slightly closer shot of comets Neowise at the same time. This was in the middle of the summer, and I think it was something like 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So it was pretty tiring to do that. But I was very pleased with the results. I was hoping to. I did try later on to try and get some photographs of Neowise with the ion tail, but that never worked out. And perhaps seeing what Martin showed, I should have tried some stacked shots, but these were all just single shots. This is a shot, I think I took this in November of last year, and it's the Moon, Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn and Jupiter coming close together before the conjunction in December. This time, you can see it's very noisy, and it is also a very tightly cropped image. The thing I like about this image is that there was a kind of it wasn't entirely clear. There was a little bit of a very fine cloud cover, and it gave this lovely diffuse effect and enabled me to show the earth shine on the moon slightly, so you can see that coming through. And actually this was with a fast prime lens, and it was just handheld. So it shows what you can do if you experiment with exposure, just holding a lens handheld. Most of my stuff is adjusted slightly in Lightroom, so I adjust the darks and the light areas to try to bring out the detail. This shot was of the cold moon, so it was about the 30th of December last year. Again, I'm showing the moon in context, and what helped this image was that the snow on the ground helped to lighten up the landscape, so you could really kind of show the landscape, and the moon wasn't too burnt out. Of course, when you take a shot like this, you can't show the detail on the moon. It's just too bright, and at the same time show the landscape. So it's a compromise. I did take some shots at the same time of the moon so you could see the detail, but the rest of the shot just goes completely black. And if you try and raise the shadows, you just get this awful noise. So it's a compromise. You can't sort of do both. Again, this was with my stabilized lens, and this time it's handheld. And I went right down to a 15th of a second there at f6.4. That would have been at the longer end of the lens. As I say, it was a crop sensor camera, so it's the equivalent of something like 24 to 135 in full frame terms. And then finally, I came on to the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And again, I got up to a fairly lofty high position to take this picture. It's looking over Macclesfield, so you can see all the lights of Macclesfield, and just in the top sort of right-hand corner, you can just about see two faint dots, which are Jupiter and Saturn. Again, handheld, a 23mm prime lens, 30th of a second. I was just about able to handhold that at f1.4, so a very fast lens. And again, I've adjusted the lights and the darks to bring out the detail in the photograph. And this shot just shows a cropped area, just to show the two planets were close together. So now I'm going to hand over to Pierre if you'd like to unmute his microphone and perhaps just talk us through his shots. So here's the first shot from Pierre. Whoops. I'm drawing on my...
It's not it.
Oh no, sorry, one more shot from me. This was, I'm fortunate enough to be to 4 total eclipses in my lifetime, and this was the last one in Wyoming. And I just, again, it's a single shot. This is of the diamond ring. So when I go to eclipses, you always spend too much time fiddling around with the camera and trying to take photographs when you should really be experiencing the moment and looking around you and noticing how the light changes and how the temperature drops and how things like crickets stop making sounds and the birds stop singing and it goes quite dark. So on this occasion, I did do that, but I did manage to get some quite good shots as well, with just my camera on a tripod and a slightly different lens. This one, a slightly longer lens. Again, it was a crop sensor camera. So 135 end of the lens. It will probably be about the equivalent of a 200mm lens in full frame terms. So that's all from me. So the next shot should be Pierre's, and perhaps Pierre would like to just talk through his equipment and how he produced this image.
Hiya. Yeah, and thanks, Martin, for your talk. I very much enjoyed the first one, and it inspired me to do some of the things that I've done the last year. I'm kind of rough and ready like yourself. I haven't got a lot of time working from the middle of Didsbury, which is quite light polluted. But this one was just with 60mm. It's the new Zenith Star 61. It's on an EQ5 mount. But I did buy in the last few weeks a Canon RA. How amazing is that? And it's about 20 images stacked. But I've realized tonight that I've nowhere near stacked enough images to pull out any real detail. But you are right about the light pollution, which is a constant battle here. I'm not sure. Maybe I might try some of these tri-band or quad-band filters, but wow, they're expensive. They really are. So that's Andromeda, but I've done something similar with just an ordinary DSLR camera. One of the problems with my old one is, though, the sensor was so lacking that you can't focus on the stars because it can't pick anything up apart from a planet or the moon. So I found the Canon RA is just amazing. You can see the whole night sky fairly easily. So that's that one.
So Pierre, is the Canon RA is actually a modified camera, isn't it? It's specifically for astrophotography, is that right?
Yeah, it's had the infrared filter removed. I don't know what it's like for normal photography. They say if you adjust the light balance, it works perfectly well. I've tried it with pictures of birds in the back garden. It seems fine. It's a hell of a, I had to sit down for a long time and think about it before committing that amount of money to a camera which I might end up only being able to use for astrophotography, but it seems okay for other things. But I had to wait about 9 months for it because there's a massive waiting list since it was reviewed very positively in Sky at Night magazine. I think it was last summer. Oh, this was taken a few years ago, and this is really, I should thank Jason for this here, because Jason showed me this stacking technique that Martin talked about quite a long time ago, and I bought my first telescope, which is a 150 Maksutov, and put it on an old EQ5 mount, used to the old Neximage 5, so it's a little CCD camera, you just with a 1.25 inch little adapter, you just put it in the end, prime focus, and if you point it towards these planets, if you take enough images, usually through a little video, there's probably about 500 or 1,000, I can't remember, images here, but it takes 650 frames a second, something like that. It's really, really fast. So within a minute or two, you can have a whole collection of images, stack them, throw away all of the poor ones, of which there's going to be quite a few. And you can end up with an image like this, which is the best I've been able to do. I've since upgraded the Neximage 5 to an Altair 183, but I've still got the old Neximage 5. So if anybody texts me on the WhatsApp group, they can have it for free and have a play with it and just use it for the rest of their lives if they want to. But I think you can do a lot as long as you want to just take planets. And the other thing it's astounding at is the moon. it does need a lot of light. The sensor isn't good enough to capture any deep sky.
Fantastic. Okay.
And then this one, yeah, this is Martin. You've cost me a lot of money in the last year. So when you showed the pictures using the bar filter and stuff, I used to do that, and you can have done transits and stuff. And then you showed some pictures of I think some of these solar flares or prominences, and I really had to think very carefully. I went out and bought a LUT 60 solar scope, and that was probably taken not that long ago, and the sun's just beginning to wake up. So there's been some great sunspots recently, and you can just see a few solar flares and prominences, and I've got a little app which sort of warns me when there's any. It gives you maybe a chance at night and a chance during the day to maybe between the clouds, maybe point it at the sky. So yeah, this has been an amazing revelation, having this solar scope. You really can't do with the white filter, bata filters, you can't see the solar prominences, but one of these you really can do. So I'm looking forward to exploring this a bit more.
That's great. Thank you very much, Pierre. Jason and Zaineth, you're up next. Thank you. And first one from Jason.
Okay, great. Now this is here because I was going through some hard drives the other day and just trying to sort things out, and actually this came up, and this was one of my first ever astrophotos. So the unusual thing about this is it's not taken on digital at all. It was actually taken on film. So this is going back maybe 20 years ago, and like Martin was saying, I remember when I took this, I had it on a slide projector, and I had it projected on my wall for weeks afterwards because I was just so thrilled. If anybody's ever tried to take photographs on film, it was hard. You couldn't see what you were taking a photograph of. Focusing was horrendous. But I actually had another camera I used to slide on the back with a knife edge in there, so I could get
you're broken up.
A blink shot on the edge of that. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, carry on.
Hello. Yeah, a bit brief then. But this was really one of the first photographs I ever took. It's actually of the Crab Nebula, but it was quite nice to get the nebulosity in there and everything like that. So Martin was going on about happy act. Doing any photography at all. All I was doing was I just literally, I couldn't find later on in the evening with the Virgo cluster, faint galaxy, and I actually just literally just slammed the camera in the back, and it was unbelievable. Everything was in focus. And I was just taking photograph after photograph. But actually something Martin said of only maybe three or four images. So wish I'd actually sort of stuck on just one thing and just carried on taking photographs. The actual resolution, it's actually, I think it's actually heat from dark frames and things like that. I could have the detail, but it was the amount of effort that went into it probably took me an hour or more to set up, and was probably 20 or 30 minutes of guiding, because you'd be taking one after the other to try and get some sort of thing altering the focus every time. No effort at all went into this one. It was just a happy accident, really. Okay, next please, Andrew. Okay, I like this one because I've always liked things that sort of line up. And this is actually an occultation of Saturn. So this was earlier on in the evening, just taken through a little 80mm refractor, I think. But you can see the moon there. So it is actually a stack. So I probably took it with a DSLR. Can't remember which one now. But it's maybe sort of 20, 30 images in there. You can just see Saturn to the right-hand side, a little tiny blob. Next one, Andrew. Now, this was a little bit closer to the occultation, and this is actually taken with a webcam. If you can believe it, I'm actually still using my Philips 2U Pro camera, which I think must be 20 years old now. But this is taken with that very same camera. And was just before Saturn went behind the moon. Trying to balance out the exposures and things like that was really hard work, but there's probably maybe 300 or 400 different frames in that particular picture. Again, now this is the way I'm sort of heading now, and it's really what Martin said really sort of rang true with me, because in those days, I used to go to so much effort, and so often I was so frustrated, and you'd get sort of images back and you'd think, oh, that's no good, and you'd wasted the whole evening, particularly on film, which was dreadful because you'd have to wait a week or two before you got the results back. But I just like these sort of opportunist sort of pictures now, where this was just a partial eclipse, and Zainath actually said, oh, come on, let's go and have a look at it. And I thought, oh, no, it's not really worth it. But we just went up onto the hill behind us. And I just like this. It was just, the moon was just foreground. And this is probably the direction I'm going in now, I think, with regards to photography. Next, please, Andrew. So photogenic. They don't really require any sort of particular just available to anybody. So yeah, fairly long. Okay, next one, please, Andrew. Oh, actually, that's burnt out horribly on there. It's this is Andrew was going about eclipses. This is when we went to Libya. So actually, this one, yeah, it's not at its best. It's a very good photograph. I mean, and it really gives, you can't believe quite how wonderful the human eye is. Because what you can see with a human eye is particularly difficult to try and image. And actually, that doesn't really do it. I think, no, maybe not that many. 50 or 60 photographs in there, that picture, all stacked so that, you know, we could get everything in there. Sorry. So, again, I'm sort of going up, and what he said, I think this eclipse was 4 minutes long, spent about 2 minutes imaging and then 2 minutes just looking at it and taking it all in. This was, I think, the same, could have been the same aurora that actually Martin was talking about, because I think I got an alert on Aurora Watch and we just shot into the Peak District, and as yet it's still the only display I've ever seen, and it was very faint. You could just about see it. You couldn't see the red at all, but came out quite well in photography anyway. So again, that's probably the direction I'm going to be heading in as far as taking photographs. And I think, Andrew, next one. And this is probably my most recent, and actually I think it's probably one of my favourite photographs I've ever taken. And Andrew and I went off to Penmon a little while ago with Zainath, and it was just a wonderfully clear night. You could see the Milky Way from horizon to horizon, and there's Comet Neowise in the. This is a sort of crop down of the much larger photograph, but I think you know, when all this craziness is over, my plan is just really try and get into some really nice dark skies, and just take a few more wide field photographs, which I've never really done before. So yeah, that's what I'm doing in the future. So it's very relevant to me anyway.
Okay, Jason, thank you very much indeed. That's great.
Okay.
Zane, you're up next.
Okay, thank you. Hi. Okay, so mine isn't as not as Texas. So this is for those who don't want it to be too technical. We were in the moon from the garden. Jason had the scope set up, and I back up the iPhone up the eyepiece.
Yeah.
And that's the image. That's it.
Fantastic.
Actually, we thought about it. It would have been nicer if we had taken a video of that, actually, and then we'd have probably it through Registax or something like. It's a single shot photograph handheld through an eyepiece. It's actually really nice.
It's really good. Yeah, it's
So
fantastic.
that's my. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zainab. We've got Annette up next. So Annette, if you'd like to do your microphone and perhaps give us a little talk about, explain what this image is.
Oh yes, so this was from the solar can. It was actually a geeky Christmas present that I got from my sister last Christmas. It's a pinhole camera that's in literally a can. Here you go, in a can. It comes in a can, so you see this is the actual can that it is, and you put it up somewhere in that will capture the path of the sun. And this is the negative, so this is actually what comes out of the can. And then you can invert it, and that's what you capture. So that's from the summer solstice last year to the winter in December. And yeah, absolutely love it. Obviously, you can still see all the water damage that's around it, because let's face it, it wasn't exactly dry these last few months. But also what's interesting, I spoke to the guys who actually create the solar cans themselves, and because I wanted to understand why there was some colour that was captured at either end, and he said it's because of the extra exposure of the sun at those parts of the actual path itself. But you can have some great fun with that, and I think I've even got a disco version, which I don't think I sent to Andrew, but yeah, so absolutely adore that. And I have to say, considering it was attached to the end of a broomstick on top of a wheelie bin, sat on my drive for the last 6 months. I'm really impressed with that, I have to say. And I think from here, all my images kind of go downhill. So
no, but so does it actually use film in it in some way?
Yes. So what it is,
processed or?
Well, no. So all you do is you have this can, and you see the little black dot there. That's the pinhole. So you remove that piece of the black tape, and it is a pinhole camera. And what you do is you expose it, and there is a film. I won't take the film out, because obviously if I expose it to light, it will lose the sensitivity and everything on the paper. But the piece of paper is in there, and you scan it, which is what the first image was. So you scan that image, and then into Martin's favorite, Photoshop. And literally, thankfully, only through adjustment and invert, you're able to get an image like that you can see on screen at the moment. So it's really simple process to do. Even I could do it. So, and I've never used Photoshop before, so absolutely love it. So I would recommend, they're only about 50, not that I'm on commission, but they're only about 15 quid. You literally leave it for 6 months and you get a stunning image like that. Now, obviously, there are some people who annotate it and talk about the months and, and where everything is, but I love it. I'm really impressed with it, I have to say, even if I do say so myself.
Fantastic.
This was, I'm kind of in the field, your field, Zenith, and how you take astrophotography. This was actually through the eyepiece using my iPhone, because my DSLR had run out of battery. Yay, well done me. And this was the day before the conjunction. So however, you can see how close they are in the sky. I actually went to the car park in Wythenshawe Park. I think this is around about 6 o'clock in the evening, because the horizon near me is, well, I can't see it. So, and they were quite low in the sky for the conjunction. But I think if you do look very closely and squint a little bit, you can see the shadow of the ring of Saturn on the top one. So I know it's not the perfect shot, and I know it's a little bit blurred, but do you know what? I was absolutely over the moon that I managed to capture this. So
fantastic. I've actually put these up onto one slide. So
makes sense. Yes, makes sense. So I absolutely love the moon. I am in love with it, and the more I photograph it, the more I'm even in love with it. So these are actually taken. So the one in the middle is the full moon. Yeah, I think it was Halloween. that I took, oh yeah, the day before Halloween. The one on the right was the cold moon. Now, though they are actually taken through different telescopes. So the cold moon was actually taken through I've bought a new one. I treated myself. So I've got myself a Skywatcher Explorer, 130 PDS, so Newtonian reflector, and my DSLR. But the one in the middle is actually an iPhone through an eyepiece, and you kind of can't tell the difference. So I think I've got a lot more to do to make sure I'm making the most of the equipment that I actually have. So I've got a lot more to learn, but I'm looking forward to doing that. And the daytime moon, which I nicknamed the Death Star because it does look like a Death Star in the daytime, is also taken on my iPhone through a telescope. And I just love the detail, and I'm looking forward to being able to capture. I think I've got some ambitions this year with regards to what I can get with the moon. I want to try and get it in all the phases, and I would love to be able to kind of capture and get enough detail to be able to pinpoint the Apollo landing sites as well. So those are my ambitions for this year. I think the XY is probably something for maybe next year, but yeah, so I'm really looking forward to kind of developing my skills on that. But getting there. And this is another one. This is yeah, it is. Can you tell it's the moon taken through an eyepiece? But again, love the atmospheric clouds, and also being able to get the detail of the crater as well on the Terminator. So, but yeah, I could take pictures of the moon all day. But let's face it, clouds just don't allow, do they, at the moment?
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Annette. And Trevor, you're up next. So it's the first shot from Trevor.
Right, okay. Obviously, I have no idea what's coming up here, so this is going to be interesting. That was one taken just before Christmas with, as it says, the Pentax K1 camera, which is a DSLR, stuck on the back of a 6-inch SCT, and a single 30-second shot exposure with no attempts. Well, virtually all of these, well, I'm not knowing what's coming up, I suspect all of them will be single shots, no stacking. So that's something which, yeah, I know I'm going to have to get to grips with, because I would probably have got a lot better. But on the other hand, it tells you what you can do without doing that. Where's that? The plover, right, that's, yeah. Okay, so Kefalonia was the site for that, because the skies are nice and dark out there. Nice clear picture of the plough, I thought. As it says on the side there, 2-minute tripod supported picture. Oh, that one, right. Yes, so while I was there, Comet Johnson was going overhead, and I spent absolutely, and it was virtually directly overhead. And I had a camera mounted on a tripod, trying to point it directly upwards, which is actually a hell of a lot harder than you think it's going to be, because cameras on tripods don't like pointing virtually directly up. They like a little bit of an angle. They have a habit of not balancing very well, and trying to look through it to see what you're getting at is a nightmare. But eventually I found it, or I thought I found it. So I took a load of photos, got them back on the computer, and thought, oh yeah, it's there in the middle. Look, it's that little blue dot, which you can just about see, just slightly off center on there.
And this next one
is zoomed in. Yeah, the one right in the middle there.
Yeah,
fantastic. A little bit of something there.
It looks quite green, actually, doesn't it? It's
really green.
And this one.
Which one? Oh, that right. That's Jupiter. And it just so happened there was an aircraft. And again, I didn't know I got that. I was just taking photos, and then lo and behold, there was this red dotted line going straight through the middle of the planet, which was entirely accidental, but I quite liked it.
It's amazing because it's right through the centre of the planet.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just again single shot. As I said, 3 minutes there. Pentax K1 camera does have the advantage, if I'd set it up right, which I haven't on this one. It does have an astro tracer built into it. So as long as you align it correctly, which means doing a 3-dimensional twist to get the planes right, it will track the movement by itself without having to just being by itself. And the way it does it is that Pentax cameras have, whilst they basically do all their wobbling adjustments in the camera, not in the lens. And so what Pentax managed to do was to use the mirror adjustment to turn up to 5 minutes to track the movement of the planet, so movement of the sky, basically. So as long as you set it up right, you can actually get it to track by itself, which is really very clever use of technology. But it's a bugger to set it up. It really is a nightmare.
These two shots are of the Milky Way.
Right. Yeah, again, single shot, stuck on a tripod, the Milky Way. And again, it's quite a few of those by the looks of it. Yeah, it just goes to show what it shows really is if you've got a decent clear sky to start with, and these were taken at probably about 3 o'clock in the morning when it was absolutely warm, silent, apart from goats tinkling away on the outside. I just got up and wandered around outside and just kept taking more and more photos, all single shots, to see what I could get. And there was an awful lot there to be found. I was quite staggered when I got them back and put them on the computer, just how much there was there. They have been adjusted a bit. Now, this is one we had a discussion about not long ago when I came back from holiday somewhere, and we had this picture of the moon. If you just look along the line of the edge, you see a sort of twizzly bit coming out in the middle, and we were trying to work out what it was. So just it's like a big plume or something's exploded and coming off the surface of the moon. We ended up concluding it had to be some sort of mountain range from a funny angle, but I just liked the imagery of it. So it took a long time to work out just what it was.
Interesting.
My attempts at Comet Neowise, single shot. Unfortunately, I never really had a very clear sky at any point. Took a while to work out where it was. That was taken about 5 minutes walk from the house. And yeah, there's been an awful lot of editing on that one to get that one to that position.
I put two shots here side by side.
So yeah, 2 different pictures. Both, what this shows is with a single shot what you can achieve with a modern camera. They're taken with the Sony RX10 Mark III, which has an inbuilt 600mm zoom. But it's a bridge camera. It's not a DSLR, just got one single lens built into it, which has got a 24 to 600mm range. And I took those the Jupiter one was taken in Spain, I think, and the other one was taken somewhere else. No, they were both Spain, probably. And they were just taken literally pointing up at the sky, working out what was there, and amazing, I could actually get Galilean moon. I was staggered when I got them back and thought I can see Galilean moons with a handheld. In the case of the one one of these photos, I don't know which one it was. One of these was with one of the ones I got was just handheld, literally leaning up against something solid. One was on a tripod.
Fantastic.
My attempts at the conjunction. Again, I took loads. I put the camera by itself. I put 2 different cameras out on tripods. I put them on the back of a 9 1/4 inch telescope and a 6 inch telescope, and nothing I got looked anything like sensible. And eventually, I just decided to go back and just take one across the whole sort of gamut of the sky. Just after the conjunction, because it was a nice sort of orangey glow, and well, the orangey glow is probably Manchester, but the skyline was quite nice at that point. Yeah, that's a close-up, again with the Sony camera, zoomed right in as far as it would go. So you've got them both there, and you can just about see a few planets, a few moons there. But it's again, as someone said earlier on, if you to get the moons, you've got to increase the light levels, in which case you lose the detail on everything else.
That one's just for lens, I think.
Yeah, you could just about see the rings on Saturn on that one if you look closely.
You certainly see the shape of it better than.
Yeah, you could just about see a ring. Yeah, but there again you got the shape, and the first one was actually that light. It was taken a long time down, and it was still that bright in the sky. They're just taken from the balcony outside the house. And yeah, the second one is just a few hours or an hour and a half, I think, later on. And yeah, that's just trying again with on the big telescope on the 9¼ inch one, trying to see how much detail I could get. But it's the same compromises as other people talked about.
And that's the last picture.
Yeah, now that shows what happens when you stack. Those were actually two pictures I took separately a few years back that were stacked. Nice picture of Jupiter with 4 moons, nice picture of Saturn, and I just superimposed one on the other, thinking that's what I was after. Sadly, it's not what I saw, but never mind. It was wishful thinking.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Trevor. So that's the end of the presentation of members' photographs.
Andrew, thank you for doing that. If you come off screen share, then we've got to
try to again, come out of that and zoom and stop share. There we are.
That was fantastic. I don't know how long people want to talk for, but Martin, do you have any observations, words of wisdom, comments?
Yeah, I have to say some of those were particularly interesting because they show really what I like to do, and that's experiment. You use what you've got. It's a lot of people buy all sorts of fancy gear and don't really know how to use it because they've not spent the time learning what the controls do and experimenting and holding cameras against eyepieces. You get to understand what you've got to do to make that camera work, whether it's a phone or a DSLR or whatever. You've got to get to grips with how your camera works, and if you can get to grips with it, you'll produce better results, and you're showing it from what you're doing. I mean, some of the results were spectacular. I have to say, Andrew, the first lot, some of the images there with that had everything in context. I do very little of that. I do occasional wide angle shots, but I enjoy looking at them, and I think that the camera that you've got has really brought the images of the comet in particular out really, really well.
I was so lucky to get those noctilucent clouds as well.
Yes, well, I think you were out the same night as me, July the 11th. Because I've got a video of the clouds moving across with the comet behind them over time. And I think it was a particularly good night to be out. And the eclipse, I mean, I've done 2 eclipses, and I mean, that feeling when it goes dark, and it's just something that if you haven't experienced it, it's absolutely fantastic to experience. And I'm glad I've cost you some money. I've spent some myself. I've just gone up to I've bought a 50mm solar scope. And that was a lot of money, but it's solar astronomy it's fantastic to see all the details on the sun. And you can never, I don't think you ever get pictures as good as you can see with your eye when you're looking through the scopes. These solar scopes produce the Lunt, and the others that you can get, Coronado and Solarmax, and Solar Scope like I've got. You look through them and the detail you see, and you never seem to be able to bring that through on the photographs I've found, but some terrific shots there. I made some notes of some of the other people's shots that, let me just have a look. Was it Pierre the Andromeda stacking with the Canon RA? Yes. I mean, it's so frustrating that I look back now and think if I'd have just listened to what people were telling me about stacking, the images, the difference it makes to the image, if you put loads and loads of images on, the quality that it gives you on that end result, it's just fantastic. And I have to say that next image 5, I've got one of those, and I've used extensively, and they are great cameras. And worth, if I would advise somebody to grab that one because it's really worth having. They're about £100 second hand.
That last picture that you had of mine with Saturn and Jupiter, they were with the next image file.
Yeah, they're great. They're a great camera, and I've still got mine just in case I decide I want to use it again. I keep that. And Jason, the Crab Nebula, I've never even seen the Crab Nebula, so the image was small, but it's there, and that's part of the enjoyment. You get something, and you've done it. It's not a picture, that it's not an image. And a lot of people download Hubble images and say, look, I've made it look like this and I've made it look like that. But it's not your image. And it's just so much better when you've produced something that you can say, I've got this, I've made it, I took it, I've adjusted, here's what I've done. It's great. I think it's fantastic. And the M8182, brilliant. The Libya eclipse was fantastic, the image on that. And same with the Neowise, the shot. Who did the Neowise shot by the
lighthouse? Yeah, that was fine.
Absolutely terrific. And Zenith, the shot of the moon with the Sinus Iridium on one side and the Lunar Valley on the other was great. Absolutely great. Yeah, that's that area of the moon when you actually get a lot of magnification, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I spend hours and hours and hours on the moon, and it's the reason I bought my new telescope, because it's massive magnification, so I can get really massive. It's 2,700 mil focal length, so that I can get really close up images of the moon. I love it. I spend hours watching. And Patrick Moore spent most of his life looking at the moon. There's so much there. It's brilliant. And the solargraph, Annette, the solargraph, I've been looking at getting one of them for years. And I keep looking, I think, should I? Where would I put it? And some of the pictures that people get with them, where they've got the all the detail in the environment as well, and all the dark stretches at the days where it's rainy, and then you get the sunny bits. And yeah, Trevor, that K1, I think that's got a lot of potential with that tracking. You need to crack your focus on the Orion Nebula. That's just a tiny little bit off, but once you start stacking your images, the quality improves in leaps and bounds. It's great fun. Got interesting looking at all them. Enjoyed that.
Thank you very much,
Martin. That's very generous of you to have taken the time to make some notes and give some feedback to our members.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I've enjoyed your talk, Martin, so much, but I've also enjoyed the opportunity for some of our members to share and to talk through and to enthuse about their photographs. And people say these talks can cost them a lot of money. This talk's cost me 15 quid. So I should be out before I go to bed. I should be buying one of those solar cans. I don't know, is anyone else going to do that? They just look fantastic.
Yes, we're going to buy one.
I should put an affiliation link up, shouldn't I?
I just think that I've been studying and debating the analemma, the shape of that, with my brother over the last few days, and that would be a fantastic way to try and put the path of the sun through the night sky in context with something you'd created yourself. So it's been a great evening. We've covered a lot of ground, a lot of techniques, a lot of photographs, a lot of people being very honest and very kind to share with us the evolution of their astrophotography. We can stay on. There's no caretaker breathing down our neck. We've been at this for a couple of hours. Does anyone have any more points or questions they would like to ask?
I've just got one question for Martin, which I want to get his feedback on something, because I mean, I've just bought a new one of these,
iPhone,
and I am absolutely horrified to see how good some of the photographs have been of the Milky Way with them. So
yes, I've been paying a lot of attention to the sort of quality that people's mobile phones are producing the Milky Way. The downside is they are producing, they're picking it up, but actually when you look at the detail, they're actually not producing a lot of detail. They're getting like blobs of brightness, but they're not getting that fine detail where you start to see the stars.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, to be honest.
but what they are getting, where they do excel, all the modern phones excel, is on bright things like the moon.
Yeah.
Some of the moon shots that people have been producing with cameras are absolutely stunning.
Mm.
And what you need to do that properly is you can buy these little mounts that are about £20 to hold the phone.
Yeah, yeah.
And the results, well, it's very impressive. But I think they just need that extra bit of light to just get the chip into the right area for gain to get the quality. It's still got a long way to go yet before
I think one thing that I've sort of taken from it though is just how many people are doing it now, which can't be a bad thing, you know?
Yeah, it is. It is fantastic to see the number of people that are experimenting with mobile phones, and a lot of people discount them as it's just phones. And to a degree, there is a bit of that because they don't actually produce as good as a DSLR or a crop sensor, but people are getting into astronomy by it.
Yeah.
And it's that first step, it's that experiment. Wonder if it'll do this, click. Oh, it is. And it just gets you that bit of interest that might make you take the next step and get a better camera quality-wise for chip, and then a telescope or a mount to take aim at the stars better. And it's just small steps people need to take, and it's getting that interest, that little spark of interest that sets you off. The thing that did it for me, I met Patrick Moore when I was about 15.
Oh, really?
And he actually sent me his book, Naked Eye Astronomy, after the meeting. And that little step sprung me into what's been a lifetime of enjoyment of astronomy. I mean, I've got all sorts of binoculars that I look at the sky with. And sometimes I just go out and look and don't take any pictures and just take it in, especially if you go to somewhere where it's dark and you walk out and the Milky Way is strung from one horizon to the other, and it's just breathtaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, mobile phones they've got a position, they've got a place. I don't think, because of the chip size in them, I don't think they'll ever be spectacular, but they've got the place in the starter of getting you further and further. And I'm never going to go into a place where I'm going to, I don't know, spend a year to get one image, because I haven't got a dome in the back of my garden that I can mount things in. So everybody has to find a point where you're happy with the level and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Whether it's down here or up here, it doesn't really matter. That you're enjoying doing it is the thing. And I love astronomy, the photography side of astronomy and the visual. I think it's a great hobby, and we should promote it.
What you said struck a real chord with me, because I think, you know, I kind of went through a bit of aperture frenzy for a little while, and, you know, and got almost too technical with it, you know, and at the end of the day, it's kind of all right. We can't do it at the moment, but it's a lovely excuse to get out into the wilderness somewhere and get a really good night sky. Because I must admit, when we went and took that Pen Mon photograph with the lighthouse, you almost didn't want to take any photographs, because, you know, of course, every time you looked at, you know, to see what you were doing, you kind of lost your night vision a little bit.
Well, that looking at what you're doing is an issue when you go into a solar eclipse, and you've got a minute or less sometimes to enjoy the atmosphere. And it's you've got to sometimes just back away from the camera and enjoy what you're doing. I've got a binocular attachment to my telescope, and I sometimes put that on because it forces you not to take pictures and look, and it's just to see it with your own eyes rather than being on a computer screen. It's just great.
It's a different thing altogether, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, it was lovely, fascinating. Thank you so much.
Martin, you mentioned taking video of meteors.
Yes.
Have you come across an organisation called Nematode?
Yes, I'm in it.
All right. I think we might have had this conversation before.
Yeah, meteors. I've recorded meteors for 20 years now.
Yeah.
With different pieces of kit at the back of the house. But yeah, the bottom link on the last slide in my presentation has a link to something called UFO Recorder. It's a bit pricey. It's about £110, £120 for the program, but it allows you to save little 3-second clips of things that move in the sky at night. And I come every morning, I come to my computer, turn it on, and I've got a series of 3-second clips of everything that's moved across the sky at night by my house. And some of the meteors I've picked up are spectacular, or some are just tiny. But you can actually send all the data in, and they triangulate it all to find out what's going on. But it's certainly something as a club that if you've got somebody with a reasonable dark sky location, dark sky is better, although you can do it anywhere, and put a fairly decent camera in a dome with a little heater to keep it from misting over, and buy the UFO recorder program, the stuff you can record is fantastic. I mean, some of the exploding ones I've got at 2 and 3 in the morning when you're just not there to look. It's great.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Well, I think, does anyone else want to add anything or ask any more questions? I feel a cup of tea.
I just wanted to say, Phil, I put it in the chat, but I don't know if anyone's noticed. I've got the solar scope at the moment, but I'm not getting time to use it. So if anyone would like to take over the custody of the Society solar scope, let me know.
Thank you.
Well, Susie. Go on. No, go on. Zainab wants to ask a question. I'm not sure what it is though, because she's been all shy unusually. Go on.
No, so the question is, I read an article recently about people using a monocular and then using the iPhone on the back of it for astronomy. And I thought, you know, just something that's quite lightweight, portable, something that can stay in the car. Have you experienced people using that in the bar recently?
I haven't, and I'm fairly hesitant about it because it's a question of how you mount it to make it stable.
It comes with a tripod. It
comes with a tripod. Yeah, I haven't heard of or looked into that at all. With not been an area that I've got involved with. I've certainly seen pictures of people attaching them to telescopes, which a monocular is. It's just a small telescope. But I would be hesitant as to how good it would be, because really you need to be able to get a little bit more light into the optic. Wow. Your picture of the moon was really good, because the moon's nice and bright. You got it on a telescope, producing a lot of light into the chip.
Well, that was a 14-inch mead, so that was fine.
Yeah. But that's what will produce the more light you get into a phone image, the better. And it might be worth getting. It depends on how much, you know, it's worth, whether it's worth taking the risk. If it's expensive, I'd be tempted to buy a cheap ordinary telescope and mount it on a cheap scope rather than a monocular.
So that's easy, portable, stays in the car, so I'm not worried about, you know.
Yeah.
And then if I see something, and then quickly get out and just take a picture. That was all.
I think it just very much depends what you're looking at, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah.
I remember years and years ago. I think it was, which was the comet that smashed into Jupiter? Was it Schumacher-Levy?
Schumacher-Levy, yeah.
And I just had a really rubbishy little Aldi sort of type scope. I don't think it was from Aldi. It was it was one of the cheaper Skywatcher ones. And I actually had my iPhone and actually managed to get a video of Jupiter through it. And you could actually just about see the scar on there. I mean, it was tenuous, you know, but I mean, I was still thrilled to bits when I got it, you know. And there is something about trying to get the best results from the most awful equipment that can be quite satisfying somehow. I don't know why, but it was there. You know,
thank you.
Saw it, but yes.
I'll still want you to go anyway. I just thought maybe
having said that, we've got all the time in the world. I think the way Carolyn set this up, the recording is, the session will be stopped automatically. So I feel I now need to start bringing things to a close, and I'd like to thank everyone who shared their photographs. Thank Andrew for taking the time to put them all together and putting it together in a lovely presentation, to everyone for attending and for their questions and their interest, but Martin particularly, and mainly to you for yet another truly fantastic talk. And you mentioned about your wife and having had an accident. We very much appreciate you giving us your time when otherwise you might want it to be somewhere else. But
I shall be heading down to see if she needs any help in a minute or two. But it's really nice. I enjoyed it again. It's two good evenings, I think.
Truly, we need to draw this to a close. But Martin, I can't thank. I say this to all of our speakers. we're a group of 30 or something people who love this subject, but our society, our interest is only served by people like yourself who give of your time willingly and enthusiastically and interestingly to talk to us. So you must imagine and hear now a very loud round of applause and thanks for a fantastic talk.
It's been a nice evening.
So thank you very much, and good night to everyone.
Night.
And we're back here on February the 8th, the changing scene in astronomy. Thank you.